Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
You might have missed it, but Labour had a reshuffle of their own last week, and as with the Tories, all the top jobs, well, they remained exactly as they were. Jeremy Corbyn did lose a close ally in Chris Williamson. He'd made some suggestions on council tax, which clearly weren't party policy. There was a surprise return to the front bench for Clive Lewis, and a promotion for Laura Pidcock, who famously said she wouldn't be friends with a Tory. Labour's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Debbie Abrams, joins me now. Lovely to see you. Very good morning.
And to you, Neil.
In the spirit of goodwill to all men and women, I wonder, would you be friends with your new opposite number, Esther McVey?
As a human level, absolutely. But I have to say that in a previous capacity as Minister for Disabled People and Minister for Employment, she left a lot to be desired. She presided over, in conjunction with Ian Duncan Smith, cuts to disabled people, 300,000 disabled people, and she seemed to revel in this. And then, of course, the chaotic introduction of universal credit, on top of which she said there was no problem around food banks. There's been a 30% increase in her own food banks. She said to me when I was on the Work and Pension Select Committee that she would be open to a new inquiry around their very punitive sanctions regime, and then reneged on that. So all in all, and we mustn't forget, of course, my colleague John Trickett has highlighted in a letter to the Prime Minister on Friday about her directorship on a company that has been issued with prohibition notices around health and safety issues. I mean, this is a responsibility of the Department for Work and Pensions.
Absolutely, so, and we'll delve a little bit more deeply into that in just a moment. But in terms of the language, in this era where we're all being forced to examine the words that we use and the way in which we present ourselves to other people, I mean, language and nuance does matter, doesn't it? On the one hand, you've got Jeremy Corbyn, who repudiates violence in all its forms. On the other, you have John McDonnell defending comments about Esther McVey being lynched, being a stain on humanity. It doesn't quite add up.
We all need to be responsible for the kind of language that you use wherever we're from, not just politicians. Do you agree with the comments? They weren't his comments, but he defended them. John McDonnell, comments about a stain on humanity, comments about violence being used against Esther McVey. It's not the language that I would use. I think we need to be very careful, as I say, that all of us, you know, journalists, politicians, everybody, in terms of the language. We could, I'm sure you may be moving on to this in terms of the President of the United States and the language that he has also used publicly and privately. We are leaders, and as such we need to show leadership, and poor language doesn't reflect well on any of us.
Why on earth then is Clive Lewis back in the shadow cabinet?
He was investigated, as I understand, for some remarks which were said in fun. In this age of Me Too, you know, what message does it send, given what you just said about the comments about Esther McVey? On your knees, bitch, is the phrase that he used. And you had the same intake of breath that I had when I first saw it. What message does it send that he's back in the cabinet? He's not in the cabinet.
Shadow cabinet.
And he's not in the shadow cabinet. He's in the front bench.
He's back in a ministerial post. Yeah.
And, you know, that is something for Jeremy to decide. It is, you know, we need to be very careful of the language he uses. He has issued a profuse apology around that. And yes, you're right to highlight it, Neil. We all need to be responsible for the type of language we use and the message that this sends.
So to the level of the misdemeanour, in essence, dictates how high you can rise within the Labour Party?
I think, as I said, he made an apology.
Can we just move on to your brief then and talk about the benefits cap for the moment? I mean, is it still party policy that cap on household benefits should be removed?
We have said that we would review the benefit cap. We have concerns about it and the impact it is having on families, particularly families with children. So it is something that we've said that we would review.
So what is wrong with the benefits cap system as it currently stands then?
Well, you need to be clear in terms of what you are referring to in terms of the benefit
the household benefits cap.
The household benefit cap as a whole has been reduced even further than it was originally intended, which is having a draconian influence and impact on families, potentially moving them into homelessness. This is something that we don't want to support, certainly the reduction in the benefit cap, and we were very clear about that in the welfare bill as it was going through the House. But we also need to look at what it means as a whole. So we're saying we're having a review.
So we're not in a position to put a cost on it just yet, is what you're saying?
Not at the moment. But you know, in terms of what this means, and this has all been underwritten by the narrative that the government have had about all claimants, all social security claimants being shirkers and
in parallel with the changes in universal credit.
Absolutely, which we totally regret, and we find this absolutely repugnant. So you know, it is the message that it sends. Again, policy also sends out messages as well as language.
Can we turn to the shifting sands on which sit Labour's Brexit policy? Keir Starmer was speaking to the Fabians yesterday. He said that if the final deal does not confer, his words, the exact same benefits as membership of the Single Market and Customs Union, Labour will vote against it. I mean, is that party policy? Is he just flying a flag, red or otherwise?
I understand that when we come to third reading this week, if there aren't the concessions that we have demanded, which, for example, we know there's a human rights deficit in terms of what the government has said. If the government make no concessions,
he's talking about the final vote on the
and this is,
on the deal.
As I said, we've got report stage first. So there are a number of amendments that we are bringing forward, including the EU Charter for Fundamental Rights, which is, as I say, we have a human rights deficit in relation to this. The government refused that. They refused our amendments around protecting environmental standards, around workers' rights. It can't be. We
absolutely
cannot
fine.
have
Absolutely
this
fine.
at
I understand that. But the single biggest red line for the European Union itself is ensuring that we do not have, at the end of this negotiating process, you know, the exact same terms, you know, the exact same benefits as if we were in the customs union and the single market. Their main point is that we end up with a worse deal. So given that, I mean, Labour is essentially now tying itself to voting against the deal, whatever it may be.
No, let's be absolutely clear. There are two different things. The bill that is coming to Parliament for the third read, let me finish the point now, is around, do we accept what the government is saying in terms of what legislation from the EU we're going to incorporate into EU. This is a power grab. This is using Henry VIII powers to give powers to the executive.
I'm sorry, I am talking specifically about what Sir Keir said yesterday to the Fabians, and that is about the vote in the end. That is at the vote at the end of this process. The European Union is not going to give us the exact same benefits that we currently enjoy.
Well, not currently with the
otherwise, why would they allow anyone to be a member? Why would they want anyone to be a member of the European Union? My point is this, that if we fast forward to the end of this year, it starts to look a little bit like calculated sabotage on the part of the Labour Party.
No, I totally reject that, Neil. That's not the case at all. You know, we want to make sure that not only do we have a jobs first and economy first, and so nobody voted to lose their jobs, to have them worse conditions in the job. My 14,000 people in Oldham have EU contracts and their jobs rely on that.
Okay, be explicit with me. Do you actually think that that a deal can be struck with the European Union in which, as we heard from Sir Keir, the exact same benefits are enjoyed as we have with membership of the Single Market and Customs Union?
It will need a lot more than the government, and particularly...
But you believe it can be done?
I believe that we have an absolute obligation to ensure that that happens, and it needs. We need to make sure that people like Keir have impact and input into that process.
So do you think then that a second referendum is a good idea?
That is not something that we support. We have said that we want to see a second vote, as you have just raised, in terms of a meaningful vote in Parliament on the trade deal. But we do not accept. This is about looking at the outcomes, and we do believe that we can get the same benefits as being in the single market and the customs union. Not a member, not the customs union, but we'll look at what arrangements can. But this is about skillful negotiations, and we've seen everything to the contrary under this government. Can
we just talk about Carillion just for a second? I mean, presumably the Labour Party would not wish to see a bailout in the same way that there was with the banks.
We have said that we need to be prepared to bring contracts back in-house, to have them under public ownership. It is quite scandalous that 6 months ago we were awarding contracts. I think Liam Fox gave UK finance to Carillion for certain contracts at the same time that profit warnings were being announced. This is absolutely scandalous. The government has a lot of questions to ask. What due diligence was undertaken in terms of the contracts that relate? They have to provide financial viability determination, and that seems to have just completely gone out of the window. So it's not a question of just bailing out Virgin. We also seem to be bailing out Carillion. It is absolutely shocking. And thinking about the 20,000 employees in Carillion, they must be very concerned. But we believe that we best bring these contracts in-house to protect services and protect jobs.
Debbie Abrams, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us.